You all loved our pre-free agency draft so much that we thought we would bring it back with kind of a post-free agency draft. This is going to be a simple premise that the three of us can take anywhere. The premise being our favorite moves of the offseason. That's it. Again, Dago's going to interpret that differently than I interpret it, than Ian does. And we're going to have 10 things at the end of this, 10 statements at the end. Each of us are going to draft snake style. So when one goes off the list, boom, that cannot be said by another person. So again, we'll have 10 at the end of this. I do not know what Ian's going to say. I do not know what Dago's going to say, so on and so forth. So this should be fun. Ian Hartitz, you drew that number one pick. Why don't you kick us off?
Number one, I'm going with the Falcons signing Dante Fowler to a 3-year deal worth up to $48 million. One of our previous podcasts this offseason, we were talking about who could kind of be the Shaq Barrett, kind of under the radar, big-time difference maker. And I called out Fowler, and I stand by that. I just think this is a guy that throughout his entire football career has been one of these elite, twitchy edge defenders. He hasn't quite put it all together, but even last year with the Rams, obviously playing next to Aaron Donald and those guys helped, but he was still a top 12 edge defender in total pressures. Maybe he wasn't as efficient as your Khalil Max and all that, but we see enough flashes there to know he can be an elite performer at the NFL level. And the Falcons got him for, I don't think, an egregious deal. 3 years. They're still in a win-now window. I'm not saying their roster is ready to win now. I wouldn't put them as a favorite, but when you're paying Matt Ryan this much money, you need to try to win every single year. And their defense, really, during the entire Matt Ryan tenure, has never been anything really even close to average. So adding a big-time difference maker like Fowler, I think it could help to Karis McKinley, one of his last years potentially in Atlanta. It's a big-time piece. It's kind of a splash play, but I think in the position the Falcons are in, they need to make splash signings because, again, they're not in any type of situation where they can look to rebuild.
Of the 7 or 8 moves I wrote down, Daigle, this was not on my list. Was it on yours?
It was not. I don't want that to seem like I'm bullying Ian. It is a good move. I just think I may have missed that one. Also, we're considering that, you consider that the number one transaction of the offseason.
I wasn't really ranking it as number one.
Okay.
I like it.
But it's your favorite. I think adding Fowler to a defense big time is maybe overstating what he brings to a team. I understand this. He was a top 10 pick coming out of college, out of Florida. Then in Jacksonville, Yannick Ngakoue outplayed him. I think he obviously performed quite well with the Rams, this past 2 seasons. But this Falcons team was so far behind last year. They were one of the worst units in the NFL. The previous year, it was all because of injuries. Well, injuries weren't the case last year. And I understand it from that spot, but this wasn't, this isn't adding a piece like Clowney to it, It's someone on the level of Dante Fowler who taking the burden off Grady Jarrett, who's one of the best defensive players in the league. That's always a positive, but I'm not sure if I'm quite there with you on Fowler's individual talent.
In a microcosm, though, speaking strictly in terms of fantasy, it's good because he's such a talented player that his pass rush alone will allow us to sometimes play Falcons defense in high-scoring affairs because, let's be honest, this team is still going to play from behind a lot and be throwing a lot still.
Ian, let me ask you this, because this NFC South obviously is a quarterback division now with Tom Brady in the fold. But how would you rank the defenses? Because – the New Orleans Saints, I think, would be an easy number one. But out of that bottom 3 in the NFC South, with the Bucs, with the Falcons, and with the Panthers, where would you put the Falcons in that order?
Probably 3rd.
Okay.
At this
after
point,
the Bucs.
I think the Panthers are easily the worst defense in the NFC
That's
South.
what I mean. That's what I mean. So the Bucs would be 2nd.
I think the Bucs challenge the Saints too.
Second half of last season, Bucs came on.
Yeah, I wouldn't just give it to the Saints.
I was surprised. I was doing some cornerback rankings a couple weeks ago. I'm like, Carlton Davis and a couple of those younger guys they've had coming up. No, they're not world beaters just yet, but I think, it wasn't the easiest defense to be playing in as a cornerback because of how much they kind of sold out to stop the run on a game-by-game basis. But they started to kind of put it together in the second half. So, we always talk about defenses. They aren't especially great defenses year to year. They aren't as consistent as offenses can be. But, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if the Bucs could actually have a above average defense really again in 2020. But I think Saints right now are still far and ahead above everyone else. We forget how huge that Davenport injury was in week 12 or 13 or wherever it was kind of going into the playoffs. They just didn't have that piece, but at full health, Saints are scary.
Low key, this Falcons secondary is going through some change with Desmond Trufant out. Obviously, Isaiah Oliver was a second-round pick in 2018. Ricardo Allen, Keanu Neal, and DeMonte Casey are a fun, like, kind of safety trio. The other cornerback slot is an interesting storyline to follow as we approach the draft. All right, Daigle, hit us with number 2.
I think number 2 should be number 1. And I know we've talked about it extensively already, but the biggest sign in the offseason was Tom Brady latching on to the Bucs.
Yes.
There are question marks. It's not exactly a shoe-in. I know we attribute his poor yards per attempt last year, 6.6, to a lacking surrounding cast, but this is uncharted territory. A 43-year-old now attempting to lead a team to a Super Bowl win, surrounded by some of the best weapons in the entire league. Like last we saw, 42-year-old Warren Moon in like 1998 threw just over 200 passes. But that's the closest thing we have to an aging quarterback suddenly going into a new system. So who knows what's going to happen? But we talked about it extensively. Like I said, it comes down to lack of turnovers and just a winning quarterback, and that's what Brady is in this system. So outright, that's the number 1 transaction.
Finally, I don't have to be the one to nominate Tom Brady for something in this conversation.
I didn't leave it open.
I'm right there with you. This should be number 1 in that the Bucs records the last few years, 7-9, 5-11, 5-11. Just one winning season from the Bucs since 2011. And Ian, you and I have had like a really good conversation, I think, about Tom Brady this entire offseason. But just because I believe Brady adds like a significant amount to this Bucs team, that doesn't mean I think he's like peak Tom Brady. You know what I mean? Like he has obviously declined, and I think he would probably admit that too. But of all the quarterbacks that change teams this offseason or are open to changing teams this offseason, Tom Brady was clearly number 1 on that list.
Yeah, it looks like Bruce Arians and Brady are being realistic about everything he just said. Like, he's not the same player, and that's okay. They're not going to ask him to go in there and throw downfield 40 times per game. I mean, this was some of the questions Arians was getting originally. Like, why do you have Brady here if you want to, no risk it, no biscuit all game? But what Arians said really stood out to me, and it was actually Tom Moore, his offensive consultant. He used to be the Colts offensive coordinator, Peyton Manning. Basically, he said, you don't go broke putting money in the bank, take the damn check down. So Arians is coming around to the idea that, you can throw shorter. And look, this has been what Breeze and the Saints have been doing for over a decade. Like, the idea you need to be throwing the ball downfield, as sexy as that is to us watching at home, doesn't always correlate with being a great NFL offense. So I think the big concern that maybe myself and others were overstating early on was, how is Brady going to, be the same type of quarterback Winston was in this offense? But he's not going to be the same type of quarterback. He's going to be Tom Brady. And, just compared, like we were talking about the defense, it's going to be between the Buccaneers and Saints in this division. And I think it's safe to say if Jameis was under center, we wouldn't have that same takeaway.
On those 16-plus yard throws, Tom Brady completed 40 of those last year. I agree with you. And it's funny, there was a quote circulating this morning that I actually tweeted from Peter King's column and video from this past July, that Bruce Arians told Jameis Winston, hey, if you check it down instead of launching the ball 30 times in a season, that goes from 30 interceptions to 300 yards on 30 completions. And obviously, I mean, that was basically fortune telling from Bruce Arians. Ian, I do want to say, since you went on a positive note, I'll say this on the negative note. There were 2 standout spots where I think Brady declined last year. One was in the red zone. And I think that naturally just gets better moving from the Patriots to the Bucs, because you go from Mohamed Sanu and Julian Edelman and whoever else at tight end to now, obviously, you have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and O.J. Howard. So just the talent differential is going to help in the red zone, but obviously against pressure too. And for so many years in New England, they had one of the best offensive lines. That was not the case last year, and some of that was the left tackle health and the center health and so on and so forth. Well, he's going to a team in the Bucs that don't have, premier talents along the offensive line, maybe some really solid players. So we're still going to see a lot of the quick game work. But I would say I would not be surprised, Ian, if Tom Brady surprises you with his deep ball rate and completion percentage this year in that area too.
Yeah, I don't think his deep ball was necessarily the problem last season. He's never really thrown deep with that much consistency, especially over the last kind of half decade or so. But yeah, he was a top 15 quarterback in QB rating throwing deep. As you alluded to, the pressure is the issue because, he has last year. I think him and Rodgers were just clearing away the top 2 quarterbacks in throwaways. You know, when guys get around his feet, it's been a problem. And I don't like to – I feel like citing pressure as a negative for a quarterback is kind of lazy because no quarterback is better when they're being pressured and being hit. I mean, obviously that's going to make life tougher for anyone. But when I believe it was only Mitch Trubisky was the only quarterback worse than Brady in yards per attempt under pressure, clearly not a positive.
Dago, anything to close?
It is kind of funny that Arians goes from no risk it, no biscuit to Jameis. And then the moment they even have a chance at getting Brady, his quotes are, no, it's okay. Just dump it off. Who cares?
All right. Moving on to number 3. This one was right there with Tom Brady for me. And it's DeAndre Hopkins moving to the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, Arizona traded David Johnson, a 2020 second-round pick, and a 2021 fourth-round pick to get Nuke Hopkins and a 2020 fourth-round pick. I mean, so basically what did they give up? They gave up a running back they weren't going to use and then a second-round selection this year. In fact, the offense was even better last year when Kenyon Drake immediately entered that offense in like the span of 3 days versus when David Johnson was on the field last year. Just to give up that small amount, it's so rare to add a special talent without that first round draft capital. So now you have this offense in Arizona with Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, Andy Isabella, DJ Humphries at left tackle, and a right tackle who they'll probably take in the top 10. That's a lot of resources injected into an offense. But really, when you think about a big picture, that's what this league is all about, right? It's creating an offense that puts the opponent down on the scoreboard. And then when you're in a negative game script, an offense that has the potential to put up 21 points on the board in a single quarter. And Dago, I think the Cardinals have been able to build that in just one offseason.
Again, I don't know if it directly impacts Hopkins' personal impact on the field immediately. Like perhaps his production, his standalone value falters a little bit. But overall, it just makes the offense so much better, even logically, to add a receiver of his caliber for a team that just lacked any playmakers whatsoever. Like Larry Fitzgerald is arguably the most skilled or the most consistent receiver in league history over time. But that has still fallen off dramatically even the last 3 years. Like his impact isn't being felt on the field anymore, even though he looks healthy. So yeah, just adding Hopkins logically to this offense is such a big takeaway. And I had it as my number 2 move actually on my list.
So I've been looking at the Hopkins trade because it's anytime there's 100% unanimous, like Bill O'Brien's crazy, I just want to see where the guy could potentially be coming from. And let me say first, I do think Kyler and Hopkins are going to form a fantastic connection in Arizona. With that said, 2019 wasn't the best version of DeAndre Hopkins we've ever seen, really by a long shot. I mean, it was the first season we really saw his average target depth resemble more of a slot receiver than going downfield, which is fine. Michael Thomas was the best wide receiver in the league last year, and he only had 8 targets go 20-plus yards downfield all season. But, I mean, career low yards per reception for Hopkins. His yards per target was the lowest since the Brock Osweiler year. Entering probably a better overall offensive situation should calm those, but I do wonder if O'Brien, the Texans, kind of think maybe those days of Hopkins being a force at all 3 levels of the defense are over. The good news is I think even if he is at this point in his career more of a short area receiver, which, again, I don't think is necessarily the case, but that should work just fine in Arizona with the amount of quick hitters that offense kind of utilizes anyway. So I've said before, I think the offensive line, a little bit of an understated issue in Arizona, but it's hard not to call this, if not the third, probably the best move of all free agency.
Did you guys realize Deshaun Watson has just 9 career dropbacks without DeAndre Hopkins in the lineup in his career so far? So we're going to see a different Deshaun Watson on the field, potentially. I'm not saying from an individual talent perspective, but just from an offensive design perspective. I mean, obviously Bill O'Brien is giving away play calling duties. In my opinion, that can only be a positive to whoever's taking that on because nothing was easy in that offense. Dave, I want to ask you this question though, because from a team building perspective, I wax poetic about how it's so great when you have this rookie star, and I mean star. There might not be a better talent at quarterback in the league right now other than Patrick Mahomes than Kyler Murray. I think he's that special. But again, they're devoting so much, especially if they spend a top 10 pick on that right tackle. How are they going to build a defense? Because maybe the right way to build a defense, and if you take the Chiefs model, is to go out to such a big lead than to have like playmakers on defense that when another team is trying to catch up or slow them down, then you have like your Buda Bakers or your Patrick Petersons or your Byron Murphys that can make those plays, or Chandler Jones as well. But they're not going to be this complete defense that I think so many from the outside looking in want them to be.
Right. And that's the thing. They have coverage in place, right? Just in having Patrick Peterson, who, yes, had a poor down year, but perhaps he's in store for a bounce back. Who knows? And I think that's why they've been making splash signings in their front seven, just to present some element of a pass rush between Jordan Phillips, Devin Kennard, Devondre Campbell, just players like that can add some semblance of a threat once the quarterback holds the ball too long. Which they didn't even have last year. So, yes, those aren't stars in the making, but I think that's how you make a defense around this offensive unit is to basically build one that's league average, but can perform, especially in pass rushing, above expectation in the right matchup.
I like that. Making plays when like the opposing offense is trying to overextend to catch up. I think we're going to see that more and more often, especially defenses that are attached to these explosive offenses. All right, we're at the turn. We've gone through 3. Let's go to number 4. I'll stick at wide receiver. This is a theme. Stefon Diggs going to the Buffalo Bills. The Minnesota Vikings received, talk about a different compensation. I think it's good value that they got for Diggs. This is quite different than the Texans. Because the Vikings got 2020 first-round pick, a 5th and 6th-round picks, and then a 2021 4th-round selection. The Bills entered the offseason with one of the highest cap figures in the league in terms of available room. But this move is one that I think can change them. And again, just a wide receiver out there who was willing to change teams did not have the talent equal to Stefon Diggs. I mean, this is the team, we forget, almost exactly a year ago tried to trade for Antonio Brown. That crumbled within 12 hours. So it's clear that they wanted to add more than just John Brown and Cole Beasley, who played admirably. But having now as your primary wide receiver in Stefon Diggs, sure, he's going to play with Josh Allen. Josh Allen is not accurate. I even love riding on that roller coaster, and I will tell you that Josh Allen is not accurate. But we've seen Diggs get emotional in the past and on social media because I think, Ian, he gets most frustrated when he gets open down the field and his quarterback is just unwilling to throw him the football or even target him in those areas. And that happened too often with the Vikings in his mind. That's not an issue. That's not an issue, right? With Josh Allen, like he's willing to throw down the field. The question is just how accurate it's going to be when he throws down the field.
Yeah, it's just wild, like how good Diggs was last year, and it still just wasn't enough from him. I mean, he was easily the number 1 receiver in the league and yards gained on deep balls. I mean, the only guys that even matched his total have been Tyreek Hill, Allen Robinson, back in that Bortles year, Calvin Johnson, and Jordy Nelson over the last 10 years. I mean, this is a historically great field stretcher, and now he's got a quarterback that literally can probably throw the ball out of the stadium. Now, obviously, Allen's arm strength and his ability to throw the ball deep are 2 entirely different conversations. But again, we saw how much better Allen got in year 2 when they added Smokey Brown, when they added Cole Beasley. We're all members of the John Brown fan club here. I mean, I do think he can be a team's number 1 wide receiver and a good passing offense. With that said, now he's your number 2 receiver. I mean, this is like when we talk about how great it'd be if T.Y. Hilton, Robbie Anderson, some of these guys could be complementary pieces. Now John Brown's an overqualified number 2. Beasley's an overqualified number 3. It's, I think, clearly the top trio of wide receivers in the league, assuming like you're not like, you know, the Falcons, maybe Ridley and Julio and Josh, you could say are better, but assuming we're not taking a 0 at one of those positions, I think you now have the best wide receiver trio in the league. You have 2 more years of this mini Super Bowl window with Josh Allen still on the rookie contract. They're going out and trying to do their thing. I love it.
Daisy?
Agree as well. Again, for fantasy-wise, I think it takes away from John Brown, Dawson Knox, everyone involved. But overall, like, how can you not love Stefon Diggs in this offense? He was a player I was willing to bet on, even with Adam Thielen coming back in the Vikings offense. And I typically shy away from wide receivers changing offenses and just getting new playbooks as a whole the following year. But Diggs is easily one of the most talented receivers in the league. Next Gen Stats charted him with the 3rd fewest yards given at cushion from the line of scrimmage, and yet he still finished top 40 with 2.5 yards at separation when targeted, because he's one of the best at getting separation among cornerbacks. And so that's a skill that the playbook doesn't even matter. It should still resolve itself easily within the offense. And again, that might not lead to 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns, but it just makes the offense, and Josh Allen in particular, better overall.
I'm really in on the Buffalo Bills in 2020. Like, I understand if you watch Allen and like the details and like the drive to drive game point you to him not being a good quarterback. I understand that, but like the high variance of it and being attached to Brian Daboll, I'm not worried about it. I'm also not worried about this team as a whole, because I think Sean McDermott locks down this defense. They add someone like Quentin Jefferson who can move inside in pass rushing situations. Then you have, along with Ed Oliver, then you have solid edge rushers, and you added Mario Addison. I'm naming those because I don't think that you guys are going to on this list. So Ian, let me ask you this question. Other than the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens at the top of the AFC contenders as they were last year, is it crazy to put the Buffalo Bills third?
Yeah, I think the Steelers with Big Ben back are pretty sneaky complete, but I'd put them probably fourth behind the Steelers. I mean, they don't have any holes really. Like, Josh Allen is the biggest hole. And again, I don't think he's this awful quarterback that you can't win games with. They only lost one game last season by more than one score. I mean, even in the weeks where he wasn't, you see some bad box score stats sometimes passing the ball, but hey, the things he can do, run the ball, he puts up points, he keeps the offense moving more games than not. They are very sneaky complete, and they can contend. You remove the Texans kind of as a threat just based on Bob's doing. You assume that Belichick is going to have probably a step back year. Yeah, this is the year to make a run for Buffalo. And last point on Stefon Diggs, because we have talked about, he's been very vocal about his displeasure in the past. His Twitter has gone from like daily wild kind of mysterious remarks about trades to now he's like NFL analyst Stefon Diggs, and it could not be more fun to see. He's asking like who's the top
he's happy
receiver. He's happy. It's fun. It's fun having a happy Stefon Diggs on social media.
Digga, let me ask you the same question. Other than Chiefs and the Ravens, could you envision the Bills being third favorites for the AFC?
Sure. The Steelers make a presentable argument, but again, like Roethlisberger in his age 38 season, fresh off shoulder surgery, that at least brings to light question marks. So yeah, why not the Bills? I'd at least like to see Josh Allen versus the Steelers defense, which stayed in place despite being a top shelf unit, and see where we go from there.
Buffalo was the league's seventh most run-heavy team in 2019. I'll be fascinated to see if they do throw more often, because the efficiency, as we discussed throughout the entire season, just wasn't there last year. All right, here are the four so far. Dante Fowler to Atlanta, Tom Brady to Tampa Bay, DeAndre Hopkins to Arizona, and Stefon Diggs to the Buffalo Bills. John Daigle hits with number 5.
Get Mr. one-year stopgap himself, Phillip Rivers, on the board, going to the Colts, the 5th best move of the offseason. Reportedly already knows 80% of his playbook stemming from his time with Frank Reich as the Chargers OC together. And yes, I understand, poor touchdown numbers last year, poor turnovers, poor yards per attempt. Yep. But the Colts in general have playmakers underneath that the Chargers lacked. Last year, Rivers could only depend underneath on Eckler and Gordon once he joined the team, and nothing really more, especially with Hunter Henry missing a little bit of time. But Paris Campbell, remember, a 99th percentile spark athlete who was coming back fully healthy, and he dealt with 4 separate injuries last year that really just ruined his rookie year. You have Nyheim Hines, if you choose to use him behind Marlon Mack. Jack Doyle, one of the safest vacuum and safety valves underneath. And then T.Y. Hilton did suffer a career-low average depth of target with Jacoby Brissett last year. But T.Y. Hilton doesn't have to be a downfield threat. You can use him in that manner, as he showed last year and starting the year with 200-yard games before he also got injured. So I just think the offensive line, most importantly, and then the weapons around Rivers lead to a tremendous situation that the Colts can still draft Jordan Love and just have or any rookie quarterback for that matter, and have Rivers tutor him for 1 year and then get out of the way.
Yeah, this was always the team we pointed to and said, if Rivers is going to go anywhere else and have more success than he will.
Arguably the only team.
literally the only team, and
Yeah.
it's the Colts, and that's where he landed. And I think it is because of that offensive line, Quentin Nelson, those dudes, really were just the force behind that team. Don't forget, they went into Kansas City with Jacoby Brissett, Marlon Mack, and they got that W, in a primetime game. Then pretty much half their kind of receiving weapons fell off the map and things just fell apart. I'm almost like, I wish Jacoby got a little more of a chance. I would love to see Jacoby get one season where he knows he's a starter before late August or even early September, that 1 year. I just feel like the things he hasn't done well, which is, kind of quick decision making. He tends to run around a little bit, maybe take more sacks than he needs to. Phillip Rivers is going to take all those check downs and open intermediate throws that Jacoby probably doesn't force. But to me, that's something that quarterbacks learn more with experience. So even though Rivers is probably the better Colts QB option for 2020, I'm not giving up on Brissett as a long-term play just yet. And I think putting Rivers in for this one season, I question the ceiling. I question if it really is the best long-term decision for the Colts.
I'm a little nervous too, because so much has been written about Tom Brady's quote-unquote decline that I think it's been overlooked, to me at least, how much of a Phillip Rivers decline we saw. Like, he's always been this spot thrower and probably one of the more underrated quarterbacks of the last 20 years because of it. This awkward release that, he's an anticipation thrower. I just feel like, and I've said this quite a bit, I don't know if he knew where the ball was going to land last year when he threw it. And and I understand, Daigle, that underneath options might improve now with the Colts, possibly, but you're not going to have a Keenan Allen and a Mike Williams and I think obviously T.Y. Hilton is fantastic, but there's an argument to be made that his options get worse in the passing game. Now, his offensive line obviously considerably upgrades, and if they keep him clean, Phillip Rivers can definitely be the type of quarterback to dice up a defense. But I'm a little nervous that this isn't going to work out quite as well as Tom Brady obviously moving to the Bucs.
I wouldn't even say it's an argument. The talent is worse offensively in Indy, but better offensive line as a whole. And I trust the playmaking and grade it well over Anthony Lynn, or the play calling. So that's why I'm not really worried about the talent drop off, because I think the pieces seamlessly transition into what Phillip Rivers does well this year.
Ian, if there was one player that benefits most from the Phillip Rivers addition to Indianapolis, who is it?
Mike Williams.
Let's say on the Colts. Is it Nyheim Hines? Is it Marlon Mack?
Jack Doyle.
Oh, interesting.
We've talked about the Antonio Gates and Hunter Henry connection all these years, and whenever Rivers has had that tight end, he's fed him. And Doyle now with Ebron gone, he can actually take that full-time tight end role. We'll hear the training camp Mo Alley Cox rumors as we do every single year. But no, Doyle, the last time before Ebron got to town, he was the PPR tight end 7 in 2017 with Jacoby Brissett. And now, by I think anyone's estimation, he has a better tight end throwing quarterback under center.
I really want to see Paris Campbell, though. We forget how explosive and how exciting it was. 4.3, 140. Like I already said, 94th percentile spark athlete. But he had 4 different injuries, including a broken foot mid-season. He's just a shallow in his rookie year, 8 average depth of target, meshes so well with Phillip Rivers throwing underneath. Just to get him the ball underneath, I think, is a massive help.
That's an idea for one of these Tuesday drafts, is the second-year players that we've all forgotten about that could really blow up in the future. That's what we need to do in the near future. By the way, the world is a crazy place right now, but this Colts story in the last 250 days or so is wild when you think about how this time last year, we knew Andrew Luck was obviously coming back from injury, and everyone was expecting him to be the starter in 2019, 2020, to that third preseason game, everything that went down, Jacoby Brissett playing well in those first 8 games, to now obviously them having another starting quarterback in Phillip Rivers. Things change quite quickly across the league. All right, Ian Hartitz, you have 2 picks in a row. Kick us off with one.
So one of them is a group of picks, and I'm not sure how it's going to work out, but I appreciate the Jets trying to make all sorts of changes to what was clearly one of the worst offensive lines in the league. They've added Seahawks tackle George Fant, Panthers guard Greg Van Roten, Broncos guard center Connor McGovern. They re-signed Alex Lewis, Josh Andrews in there. Look, last year wasn't all perfect for them. They had Chuma Edoga, their third-round offensive tackle. He missed 8 games. They had the center they brought out of retirement, just looked like he was still retired. not good. Only the Steelers averaged 1.4 also yards before contact per rush, and only Daniel Jones was pressured as much as Sam Darnold. Run blocking, pass blocking. I know pressure and sacks are more of a QB stat in the offensive line, but very few things to indicate this offensive line was anything other than just complete garbage last season. And, I think the offensive line, like defense, can sometimes be a positional unit that you can't help in free agency. We saw the Bills do this last season where you throw a lot of resources at it and hopefully some of them stick. They're doing something. They need to do something, especially since they didn't really manage to add more receiving talent at Darnold's disposal. Maybe Chris Herndon comes back healthier this time around, but switching Robbie Anderson for Rashad Perryman doesn't do a whole lot for me. I think the offense in general. But look, it's a team. Sam Darnold's still 22 years old. Guy is still young as hell. And last season, for what it's worth, it might have been the flukiest 6-2 finish we've seen, but they did really start to come on at the end of the year. Their wins were against the Giants, Redskins, Raiders, Dolphins, Steelers, and they had a loss to the Bengals thrown in there. So I don't want to take too much away from the end of the season run, but we have seen flashes of confidence from Darnold through these 2 years. Now maybe he has a decent offensive line to play behind.
I think it's very similar to what the Bills did last year, and I think it's great that you pointed that out because last year on the Bills, you had Quentin Spain, Mitch Morse, John Feliciano. You took Cody Ford in the second round. Ty Nsekhe was also a free agent. Like, they just threw so many darts and hopefully tried to find like a group of 5 that could work together. And I'm with you, Ian. Like, you can get away with average talents if they stay healthy and they operate together for like a 16 to 17 game window. That's the biggest determining factor for me in so many offenses as we reach the playoffs is just offensive line cohesion and health. And that's sometimes something we obviously cannot predict. I mean, so much of that is luck. So while none of these names, and obviously George Fant at left tackle was basically just like a bulky tight end in the Seahawks offense, like a swing tackle. Maybe as a group, Daigle, they can work together. But is that enough? Is that enough with Adam Gase as a play caller? I don't know if he showed enough last year to make us as optimistic as we were exiting last preseason with the New York Jets.
Simply put, he did not show us enough. But like you said, Buffalo and Atlanta last year, it's at the very least a concerted effort, which I've enjoyed the past 2 or 3 seasons. These teams going all in on just adding bulk at a position they know is their weakness. The Jets last year finished only ahead of the Dolphins in adjusted line yards. The Jets finished only ahead of the Dolphins and Redskins in adjusted sack rate. Like, it was clearly their lone weakness outside of just injuries, random injuries occurring throughout the year on offense. So to see Le'Veon Bell in particular, and now Sam Darnold potentially get time. Like, Le'Veon Bell only averaged a yard before contact last year. Literally got the ball and just got his helmet stuffed the moment he touched it. And so to see him now get time and still be used as a 280 touch back, I'm interested. At the very least, you have piqued my interest.
This Jets team obviously would make a big statement if they go and select a wide receiver in the first round, because I think they need it. Ian, my question to you is this, and I know Joe Douglas didn't take over until last year's draft, but this has really been 2 straight off seasons that they really haven't added, I would say, a true difference maker on either side of the ball. I know Daigle mentioned Le'Veon Bell, but Le'Veon Bell is very connected to his offensive line blocking, as we've seen, and that's the case with basically any running back in the league. C.J. Mosley's obviously a major contract, yet he was off injured last year. So, Ian, how this team has had massive cap space, especially this year, and they haven't been able to pull in and reel in a big-time free agent. Do you think that's the plan, or do you think that's just the inevitability of what the Jets are right now?
I mean, I think they've tried. Like, they had the Anthony Barr, that weird situation last offseason kind of go through. But I think, look, they're trying to build around their young guys, I think, generally. I mean, Sam Darnold needs to be the face of the offense, and Jamal Adams already is the face of the defense. So, yeah, I would love to see him getting a Clowney sweepstakes, perhaps. I mean, that'd be a huge addition to a defensive front. But, yeah, I'm not sure if it's their plan. It's been hard to tell with this Adam Gase kind of team since he got there and even before he got there if the Jets are going by a plan or not. So, short answer to your question, I don't know what they're doing. But I do think that I wouldn't say they're against adding high-price additions in the future.
All right. We're hitting the turn now. Ian Hartitz, you're back up on the board.
So this it's not a top 10 greatest move of free agency, but I really like it. So I'm going to talk about it. And that's
That
the
works.
Packers. That's the Packers getting Devin Funchess. 1 year, $2.5 million deal. This is one season after he went to the Colts for $13 million. What did he do for the Colts last season? He broke his clavicle after dragging a defender like an extra 4 yards to pick up a first down on a fourth down in week 1. That's all we saw from Devin Funchess. And before that, we have a guy who is still just 25 years old. He averaged 4 catches, 50 yards, 0.5 touchdowns in 15 career games without Greg Olsen. And, you know, everyone out there that likes to say that Cam Newton's just been this washed quarterback for years, which he hasn't been. But if you want to hang your hat on that, then what's that say about Funchess? I mean, he hasn't really had a chance to be a number 1 or even number 2 most of the time target and kind of a as functional offense as Green Bay. I don't know if he's going to be great, but he's still so young. He gets some unfair, like people are going to say, oh, Rodgers can't throw to tight ends and kind of use that to mock Funchess. The guy ran a 4.48 on Michigan's pro day. He's not Kelvin Benjamin, even though they kind of looked alike when they stood next to each other for a couple of years. So, again, Funchess, as you're paying $13 million for the guy, probably not. Hasn't proven enough. But only 2.5 on a depth chart where Alan freaking Lazard is our, number 2. Nothing against Lazard, but yes, let's take some shots on guys. And even if you do want to say that he's more of a tight end at this point in his career, which I disagree with, he's better than Jimmy Graham. So for me, it was a very low risk and potentially decent reward signing for Green Bay.
Being the Panthers insider, Josh probably knows more about this than we do. But I will say, like, I've been a big fan since he came out of Michigan. He just really got an unfair rep. It's kind of like how Mitchell Trubisky should have been drafted in the 4th round and not the 1st. Whereas Devin Funchess was drafted in the 2nd round by the Panthers sheerly on raw athleticism and hoped he would develop, and he's still developing. The ceiling is still the limit. Like, he hasn't pieced it together, obviously, but I'm still a big fan, if only because he's a 6'4", 230 athlete being used at receiver who just hasn't stayed healthy and hasn't pieced it all together. Josh, to the insider, let's hear more.
I mean, this is going to be 3 for 3 because low-key I really enjoyed and liked this move. I just been fearful of putting that out on Twitter because I didn't want to be roasted by the entire internet. And, that's always the case whenever you talk about Devin Funchess. But I think last year he signed a $10 million contract or $7 million with the Colts. And now because he missed because of injury, this is a great value. And this entire conversation around Devin Funchess, now he's a tight end or needs to move to tight end, just get over yourself. Just stop it. It's a waste of words because Devin Funchess has not been a tight end since, I believe, his freshman year at Michigan. Now, where he does succeed, I think, and where he's going to be highly valuable with the Packers is in the slot. And as a big slot who can outbody defensive backs, who can work across the formation, there's a reason why Geronimo Allison is no longer on this team. And Geronimo Allison signed, I think, with the Detroit Lions. This team needs a slot receiver. And Devin Funchess at a 1 year, $2.5 million shot, he's well worth it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But from a team that has not added passing weapons and pass catchers around Aaron Rodgers, Ian, I'm with you. This could be a really, really good value play. It could also be just a complete waste of time that we spent the last 7 minutes on.
Yeah, we all wanted Robbie Anderson to end up there. And Funchess, for the price adjustment, I think is a very good replacement for them to get. But, yeah, there's definitely a decent chance that this conversation ends up being, 2019 Dante Moncrief in Pittsburgh.
I'm interested to see who they add on day 1 and day 2 because they're clearly not done after whiffing on Austin Hooper.
We said that last year, though, Daigle. We said that last year.
They cannot go in with only Devin Funchess as their offensive addition after coming out and entering the offseason, knowing they need to surround themselves with more playmakers. This isn't an addition by subtraction, just getting rid of Jimmy Graham. Yes, That was a plus, but you don't throw in Jay Sternberger, who I'm still a big fan of, as your every down tight end, and then surround yourself with the same guys essentially, plus Devin Funchess as the answer to offensive woes.
I'm with you. We said the same thing last year, though. I'll put it from this perspective, though. The 2019 offseason, I should say, the Packers were so invested in the defensive side of the ball, right? They went out and signed Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith and Adrian Amos. And they wanted to improve that defense. So I think, at least from my seat, wanted them and thought that they might do the same thing with the offensive side of the ball this year. And it didn't happen. So I don't know. I think we can say that, yes, the clear need is still at wide receiver, Daigle. I'm just wondering if it actually comes into fruition because we said the exact same thing last year too.
Then load up on Lazard. Like, that's all you got to do then.
I'm curious to see what happens with Sternberg because they haven't addressed that position. I'm kind of happy they didn't give out yet another high-priced, free agency tight end contract, as we've seen those not go too well for Green Bay over the years. But someone other than Devontae at some point in one of these years needs to step up. There's at least a chance it could be Funchess.
All right, we are through 7 selections. John Daigle, this is your last individual pick. Go ahead. The
Colts traded for DeForest Buckner, play ahead of All-Pro Darius Leonard, and it is very high on my list. 28.5 sacks in the last 4 years for Buckner, who is arguably a top 5 interior lineman. I talked highly of DJ Reader on the last podcast, but whereas Buckner is also just a run stuffer, he's also just a perennial threat pass rush as well. 19.5 sacks in the past 2 years, including 2.5 in last year's playoffs and 1.5 in the Super Bowl. And just the fact that the Colts have been on what seemed a perpetual search for a run-stuffing defensive tackle, and then they just finally went out and got one and paid him only behind Aaron Darnold as the second highest paid defensive tackle. It was a rare win-win, in my opinion, because the 49ers just couldn't keep him after re-signing Eric Armstead. They had a choice, and the Colts jumped in and bit at the opportunity, and I think it was a great deal.
Win-win is a good designation for it because I think the 49ers side of this equation could get nominated as well. Mm-hmm. Like they understood that in future years, you can't keep both Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner. So now when, the evaluation is its hottest in DeForest Buckner, coming off a Super Bowl caliber season, coming off a fantastic year, not just as a run defender, but obviously as a pass rusher as well, why not get a top 20 draft selection for him? Why not punt, whatever 1 year you have left with him and reinvest that immediately into the future? And they can absolutely do that with the top 15 pick they got this year, Ian.
Yeah, I'm all for it too. They added, I still hold out some hope for Malik Hooker eventually becoming one of those game changers at safety.
Just staying healthy.
Obviously Darius Leonard is already there, one of the best off-ball linebackers in the entire league. Now you got Buckner. So you can, that's one of the strongest kind of 1, 2, 3 punches up the middle of any defense I think we're going to see in the league. And the Colts just needed to add a difference maker like this. They didn't have any clear, just massive holes in the run or pass defense last year. They just weren't all that great in either. And now you add a guy that can be great against both the pass and the run. I wouldn't be shocked if the Colts could make a leap into being, a top 10 or 12 defense next season.
We just had that conversation about the Jets and them kind of like slow playing free agency somewhat, especially this year. The Colts have been doing that for a few years. Chris Ballard took a very methodical approach to off seasons, and that really came to a stop this year. And I think he's going all in 2020, and it makes sense. We obviously spend a lot of time in Phillip Rivers, now in DeForest Buckner. Even adding someone like Xavier Rhodes as a shot of someone on the outside that maybe can still have something left, that speaks volumes to me, Daigle, of the Colts really believing that this is their window to win right now.
Totally agree. And like I said, I still believe it's essentially only a 1-year deal for Rivers, for better or worse. And this is a small window with the pieces in place.
Okay. My last pick individually is going, since again, these are just our favorite offseason moves with that caveat. Joe Brady being hired as offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. I'm counting that as a move.
Okay.
Look, I've been critical of the Panthers often this offseason, and a big part of that is just their plan for the long term. But hiring Joe Brady to call plays should turn out to be excellent. His entire offensive plan is to create route concepts that create space for wide receivers and then to allow them to win after the catch. Well, the group of receivers and pass catchers that you have in that team right now, DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, and Curtis Samuel, who went after the catch, plus Robbie Anderson, to just lift everything forward. And you go back and watch Joe Brady, who's like your age and my age, John Daigle, which is wild to think about, during his time at LSU and coming from the New Orleans Saints. The Saints offense is really built on that quick game with 3 wide receiver sets. But out of that quick game, when you get defenses looking into the backfield, then you have 3 vertical routes that attack all 3 levels and 3 separate distinctions of a defense, plus 1 underneath route that can also be open. Like, I think Joe Brady can bring to Carolina what Kyle Shanahan brought to San Francisco. I know that's the name that everyone wants to bring up right now, but it's true. And just think about with Jimmy Garoppolo hitting those open receivers in the middle of the field in the short areas and then launching that one deep shot. Maybe Ian, Teddy can do the same thing with the weapons that he has afforded in this Carolina offense. And I bet that that's what they're banking on with that sign.
Yeah, I've called Teddy Bridgewater Teddy check down more than anyone. I mean, it's fun to make fun of him for that, definitely. But that's also just something the Saints have done for decades. I mean, Breeze, the first season he got to New Orleans, he ranked 35th in deep ball rate. Last season, he ranked 35th in deep ball rate. The offense doesn't throw downfield because they have now, especially Kamara and Michael Thomas. So I don't think Bridgewater is, Patrick Mahomes-esque as a deep ball pass or anything like that. But there's nothing saying he can't hit open guys downfield when they're schemed open, as you're saying, and they are kind of taking design shot plays. Same thing with Breeze. Even though he doesn't throw downfield, when he does, it can be with efficiency. All the moves have been good for Carolina. I think we always have to look at everything also from a fantasy perspective, and that's kind of the Robbie Anderson signing. Great. You add that guy to any offense in the league, and I firmly believe that's going to be a better offense. But you also add a guy, for the amount of money they're giving him, I'm assuming he's getting 60, 70 at a minimum targets. And when you have McCaffrey being the biggest target hog the running back position's ever seen, DJ Moore deserves to have, 120 plus targets. It's very tough for the Curtis Samuels, Robbie Andersons, even the Ian Thomases of this offense to kind of try to project what their targets are going to look like. But in terms of an on-field, just set up skill position players, yeah, there's a lot of good things to like there.
And the fact he is Teddy check down, that actually benefits this offense, like Josh said, given the playmakers that fit seamlessly with him. It's going to lead to a lot of ugly fantasy blow-up spots, honestly, which is why Teddy Bridgewater is kind of trending towards a top 25 quarterback option right now, because this defense only got worse. Like, we're already the league's worst rush defense, and they only got worse in losing in Poe and McCoy, just to name a few in the middle, not to mention Bradbury in the secondary. Yeah. Like, there are going to be nothing but shootouts, and they have the playmakers in place for shootouts. And Teddy Bridgewater, at the very least, will complete passes because he's not going to throw deep. So it's going to lead to just a ton of offensive plays.
All right, I'm going to make this bet to both you, Daigle, and to you, Ian. I bet we see the best vertical passing season of Teddy Bridgewater's career this year.
Interesting. Well, considering that he's never had a vertical passing season, then sure. Why not?
Well, the best one, though. I mean, you're only comparing Teddy to Teddy.
The best is the
right
only
now.
one, yeah.
The best of his career. Ian?
Oh, really going out on a limb there, Josh.
I'm just saying.
He throws 3 passes and it's the best of his career.
I actually spent this morning watching a lot of LSU concepts, and just like the way he's able to flood coverages, and no matter if it's 2 safety looks or a single high and underneath, and then just getting one-on-one matchups and crossing routes underneath. I got very excited watching Joe Brady's stuff this morning. All right.
Hold on real quick. I will say with Bridgewater, let's remember that this guy, one of the worst in lower body injuries that really anyone's ever seen. And he gets pretty much thrown to the fire last year, week 2 in Seattle. That didn't work out. Has the Dallas game where he couldn't really move the offense. After that, though, Buccaneers, Jaguars, and Bears, he was actually pretty damn good in all those starts. It would make sense if a guy like Bridgewater, I'd even put the same kind of injury, give him a little bit more of a chance to Jimmy Garoppolo, who's obviously coming off a torn ACL last season. Like, when these guys have these injuries, like, you can see why they get rid of the ball quicker. I'm more interested to see what they do next year before, we're really ready to kind of anoint them as what they were in 2019.
Look, I might have gotten my feelings a little bit when, like, the whole Cam Newton moving on thing happened. But, like, the longer I think about it, if the plan is to be competitive this year in Carolina, I'm not saying, like, I think that's the best plan, then this move to Teddy, I'm becoming more and more optimistic with it. Because if a play caller, like we keep saying, create space, especially in the middle of the field on those primary or secondary reads, I think Teddy has plenty of talent and enough talent to maximize that. And I think that's what they're hoping on. That's what they're banking on. So,
can we also do lightning round honorable mentions before we recap?
Okay. We're doing this on the fly, but we still have a 10th that we need to figure out.
Oh, do we? Okay.
So why don't we each nominate one and then have like 1 or 2 sentences, and then we will have a vote. You can't vote for your own, and then that's who gets the 10th one. How about that? Should we do that for the 10th spot?
Sure.
Okay.
Deal.
Ian, give us one and then two sentences as to why.
Emmanuel Sanders got a 2-year deal up to $19 million with the Saints. Now we're looking at top 4 options in New Orleans of Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Jared Cook, and Manny Sanders. When we've seen the Saints kind of have trouble in the playoff, it's usually been when kind of defenses can just put all their resources to Thomas and Kamara. It's going to be a lot harder to do that now with Manny Sanders. A very good offense got better.
I said 2 sentences, not 2 paragraphs, but that's noted. John Daigle, what's your nomination?
Eagles trade for Darius Slay, which could also be coupled in with Eagles signed Javon Hargrave. But either way, the moral of the story is they added to an already good defense, making it that much better.
My nomination will be the Seattle Seahawks acquiring Quentin Dunbar from the Redskins for a 5th-round selection. I mean, this follows on the heels of the Seahawks last year getting Quandre Diggs, who was maybe their best defensive player, I think Clowney last year, for a 5th-rounder as well. Dunbar goes to a secondary with Shaq Griffin and Quandre Diggs and Marquise Blair that I think is probably the closest Seattle has gotten to that Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Brandon Browner days of that secondary. And we know that defense has really tailed off since that time. All right. Those are the 3 nominations. Ian, who has your vote?
I'm going with the Dunbar call. That was a good one. I mean, yeah, only cornerback PFF grade higher than Dunbar last year was Richard Sherman. It's a perfect scheme transition.
Daigle, your vote?
Yep, I'm going Dunbar as well.
I won't tell you.
If only because, like, Emmanuel Sanders, like, it's an addition, but only because he's better than Keith Kirkwood.
I was actually going to go with Emmanuel Sanders, not to throw you under the bus here, Daigle. Because this, to me, like, the Saints have been basically one play away for multiple seasons. I mean, you think back to last year, it was that no call against Kyle Rudolph. That's a push-off. The year before, it was a no call of pass interference of Nickel Roby-Coleman. The year before that, it was the Stefon Diggs Minneapolis Miracle, right? So this team has been like that one piece away, and we've seen them try to add that in Marcus Davenport, tried to add that in Jared Cook, and both have been valuable pieces. And now if there's ever going to be a second quote-unquote wide receiver that emerges in the Saints offense, I think it can be Emmanuel Sanders. But that makes it 10
Hogan
for
can't
us.
leg drop Emmanuel Sanders. It's just facts.
Okay, these are our 10, and then we'll close with some honorable mentions because I have a few more written down as well. All right. Dante Fowler to the Atlanta Falcons. Tom Brady to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. DeAndre Hopkins to the Arizona Cardinals. The Buffalo Bills acquiring Stefon Diggs. Phillip Rivers on his farewell tour with the Indianapolis Colts. The Jets just adding 100 bodies to their offensive line in the hopes of it improving. Devin Funchess and the cheap shot that the Packers are taking on him.
I thought you were going to say I heard around the world. I was like, not really. Heard in Madison.
Deforest Buckner and the Indianapolis Colts, alongside, I would even throw out the 49ers getting a first-round pick for him. Joe Brady to the Carolina Panthers. And at number 10, Quentin Dunbar being traded to the Seattle Seahawks. Ian, any closing honorable mentions from you?
Raiders getting former Rams linebacker Corey Littleton, I think just helps. He can do everything you want a linebacker to do. Chargers getting Chris Harris, arguably one of the best secondaries in the league now, including safety and cornerbacks. And finally, I really like Eric Ebron to the Steelers. The guy is 1 season away from scoring 13 touchdowns. The amount of nice things we've said about Ladarius Green, some of these random athletic tight ends that go to Pittsburgh.
What a name!
What a name. And maybe, it would not shock me if Ebron has double-digit touchdowns in 2020.
Daigle?
I would add Nick Kwiatkowski to that Corey Littleton signing for the Raiders to play inside of Max Crosby and Cleveland Farrell. Dolphins obviously adding Byron Jones across from Xavier Howard. Broncos trading just a 7th rounder for Jarrell Casey following a down year, and the Chargers allowing Melvin Gordon to sign elsewhere.
I'll throw one final one at you, and it's the Baltimore Ravens receiving a 2nd-round pick in exchange for Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst last year, 39 targets, 30 receptions, 349 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Basically, that makes a talent like Hayden Hurst replaceable on an offense in the Ravens that are barely losing anything on either side of the ball. Now you have the Ravens, which is their window to win, with 5 picks in the top 3 rounds. Pick 28, 55, 60, 92, 106. An attempt to reload with Marshall Yanda retiring and maybe filling in for someone like Hayden Hurst and replacing that level of talent. I love the Ravens still acquiring more picks, even though that they are in their chance to win the title right now.
And I wouldn't say it's like a win-win, but just Hurst fitting in with the Falcons as a Hooper replacement. Like, there's an argument to be made as a full-time player. Hurst may be better than Austin Hooper.
Okay, now
it's
time
not
to end
even
the podcast.
close.
It's early. It's early enough to question. It's not like a sure thing just yet, but it's early enough to question. He's a number 25 overall, but set records at South Carolina as a receiving threat. Like, that's only 2 years from now.
Okay,
He's old, Josh. Get over it. You're old.
You hate when I call you young, so you can't call me old, Ian. Okay. I understand if you just want to look at the talent that is Hayden Hurst, but giving up a second-round pick to get Hayden Hurst is a poor move. That's a poor franchise decision.
Good fantasy, bad GM.
Caked into it for me.
Just like Melvin Gordon, bad GM, good fantasy.
I still like the Melvin Gordon move, but
you're old.
That's fine. All right, that is going to do it for us. Maybe we do like top 10 drafts the rest of the way on these Tuesdays. I'm enjoying this.
We got nothing but time. So
we got nothing but time. I will be back later this week with a Draft Focus podcast along with news with Patrick Doherty. So be on the lookout for that. Also, my Team Needs series with John Daigle and Ian Harditz and Nick Minzio starts up next week and goes into the week after that. So be on the series. It starts next week. I thought that's what you were referring to at the top. But yes, that's Team Needs and a mock draft for every single division out there. I also posted my top 50 mock drafts as well. So if you like Ian, prospects, go and check that out. Yeah, Ian, plug your stuff while we're here.
Oh, yeah. What have I been writing lately?
You did something I looked up, and it's like wide receiver kings year to year.
Yeah, I wrote a cool article yesterday about the NFL's wide receiver king by season. You know, all the Randy Moss kind of Jerry Rice debates on Twitter has got me thinking Marvin Harrison just has some ridiculous stat lines in the early 2000s. So if you want to reminisce, check that out. And I'll have an article out today. Talked about something on the podcast about how Drew Brees and the Saints just haven't had to throw downfield over the last decade and a half. And it doesn't matter because throwing downfield overrated. So keep an eye out for those.
And Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, I will be going live on the ROTOWORLD Twitch for a live best ball draft. I will flip my screen around so we can draft together, and I will be answering questions in between for however long it takes. And 7 p.m. Eastern is early enough to a happy hour. So join me for the Fantasy Football happy hour.
Some wine, some French white wine from Provence, hopefully, Daigle.
A lot of chilled white wine in my fridge right now. It's being used.
Yeah, my wine fridge is less than 6 feet. Social distancing is not long enough, or the gap is not wide enough between me and my wine fridge, so that's a bit dangerous right now. Mm-hmm. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks, everyone out there for listening. Thanks to producer Chris for setting this up on this call. We'll be back again Thursday night / Friday morning with another episode. Talk to y'all then. Up the Villa.